Okay, hi Cedar House. This is Miss Carrie, and I sure do miss all my Wednesday kids. And for any Tuesday kids that might be watching, I'm going to do a little bit of a review. So we have been studying Persia, and well, actually, at the beginning of the year, we studied the Egyptians of the Nile, and then we studied Mesopotamia and some of the different civilizations that were in charge of the world. For Mesopotamia, so we talked about the first Babylonian Empire and the Code of Hammurabi, which if you don't know anything about that, you should have your mom look it up because there's some pretty cool stuff there. And we also studied about the Assyrians, and they were super awesome warriors, but they were really brutal and mean. So, I mean, there's some good reading there too. And then we talked about the Second Babylonian Empire with Nebuchadnezzar. And anyway, I wanted to review some of that because our story, a lot of the Bible talks about these places, and I want to be able to put some of our Bible stories into ancient history so that you can understand what was going on at the time. Sorry. So that you could see what was going on in the world at the time. But anyway, so we know that the Israelites descended from Abraham, and Abraham also, he came from Mesopotamia in a city called Ur. And but anyways, that's where the Israelites descend from. And then, you know, they go through a bunch of stuff, and then whenever Solomon becomes king, the Israelites are the most powerful, richest nation in all of the world. So at various times, other civilizations are in charge. The Assyrians are in charge sometimes, the Egyptians are in charge sometimes. So you've got all these different civilizations, and they're all going through history, power is changing hands all the time. But at one point, the Israelites were the most powerful nation in the world, and that was under King Solomon. But then after he died, the kingdom split. So you had 10 tribes in the north. This was Israel. And then you had 2 tribes in the south, and this was Judah. And we talked about how the Assyrians came and conquered Israel. And then we also talked about how Babylon came and conquered Judah in the south. And that happened in 586 BC. And we know Daniel. We've heard the story about Daniel. And then on our Wednesday class, we read the story about the writing on the wall. And everybody knows that saying, but it actually comes from the Bible. It comes from the book of Daniel when Nebuchadnezzar's successor, Belshazzar, was having a big party in the temple. The hand of God came and wrote in the wall something, and they couldn't interpret it, so they brought Daniel to come look at it. And Daniel's like, oh, it says, you've been judged, I've measured you, you've come up short, and now you're going to be conquered. And then the next big superpower comes on the scene, and this is the Persians and the Medes, and they were led by Cyrus the Great. And Cyrus the Great is actually, this is really cool too, Cyrus the Great is predicted in Isaiah to come and take over the Babylonians and let the Israelites return to Israel and rebuild their temple. And Isaiah wrote about Cyrus, called him by name 150 years before this event actually happened. So Babylon wasn't even a strong empire at the time Isaiah was written. And Isaiah called it out, said Babylon is going to come and take the Jews away, and that the Persians, or a guy named Cyrus, is going to conquer Babylon. Anyway, Cyrus is the head of the Achaemenid Empire. So that starts Persia. That starts their big empire. And there's a lot of really cool things that happen in Persia, and we talked some about it on our last Wednesday class. But Cyrus actually, he allowed the Israelites to return to Israel to rebuild their temple. But not all the Israelites left. You have to remember, they had been there for 80 years. So not all of them left, but a good portion of them returned to Israel. After Cyrus, there's some different successions, but basically you have Darius the Great, and he built the city of Persepolis, and that's in Iran, and that's where a lot of the ruins from Persia are today, and that's where they do a lot of excavating and things. But you have to understand that Iran is not a safe place to go, and so not a lot of people are allowed in there. But anyway, they do have some some ruins. And then in this book, we have a palace in Persepolis. And then this is the only picture of a Persian queen. And we're going to talk about the Persian Queen Esther today. So, anyway, after Cyrus, we had Darius. And Darius, he really wanted to conquer Greece because Cyrus had made his empire the largest empire the world had ever seen. So, this is his empire. It's kind of highlighted, I think, in pink or red. But you can see he goes from India all the way over to Egypt, and he stops at Greece. And so he really, really wanted Greece to be part of his empire. So he was unsuccessful when he tried to invade Greece, and we learned about Phidippides, the famous Greek runner who ran to marathon from Athens, and that's where we get the name of that race. But anyways, Darius was unsuccessful, and then his son Xerxes, he was determined to defeat Greece, because that's what it was very important to his father, so it was important to him as well. And so, if you remember, to get his soldiers over there, and some people guesstimate that, I've read 5 million, some people say 2 million, some people say those are huge exaggerations, but anyway, Xerxes took 2 million guys over the Hellespont, which is just a strait of water, like a narrow strait of water. And if I had a map, I would show you, but it's basically between Turkey and Greece. And so he moved 2 million men over this little strip of water by like stacking boats up end to end. And I don't know if y'all remember, but we talked about the biremes with the Phoenician people because they were big sailors. So they're like ancient boats, something like this. But so he stacked them up end to end. Well, then a big storm happened, and all the boats were destroyed before the guys could go over it. And so he was really mad, and he ordered that the sea receive 300 lashings. So Xerxes, if you can imagine, is kind of a crazy guy, and he's determined to conquer Greece. Well, then you have the Battle of Thermopylae, which is really cool, and you should basically have your mom look some stuff up about it, but there's a narrow strip of land with mountains on one side and the ocean on the other, and the Greeks decided that they were gonna defeat the Persians right there. And so they sent their best soldiers, led by Leonidas, who was a Spartan, and he had 300 Spartans with him, but he also had 7,000 other Greek soldiers. And they held the 2 million Persians for, that's Daisy, that's probably going to be a problem. Sorry. It's okay. 2 million Persians for 2 days, and then some Greek trader showed the Persians the secret passageway through the mountains, and they came around from behind Leonidas, and they ended up beating him. So now with that pass open, the Persians are able to go on to Athens. Well, the people had found out that he was on his way, so they basically got in a bunch of boats, and Athens was deserted, so the Persians destroyed it, and Xerxes just knew he was going to win, but in the end, he lost, and he had to go back home. Well, that's where we get to today, the story of Esther. So Esther is in the Bible. It's a whole book in the Bible. And so now we know who Esther was married to. It's Xerxes, the guy who orders the sea to receive lashings when things don't go his way. So I have in this children's Bible, I was going to read to y'all the story. And in the Bible, so you can read Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah. It's all, it all kind of centers about the Persians when the Persians are in charge. So remember, a lot of Israelites have returned to Israel already, but Esther hasn't. So this says, between the time of the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem and the time of Nehemiah, there was a king of Persia named Xerxes. He ruled over the great Persian Empire, which included Babylonia. Xerxes was a moody, unpredictable man. Like all Eastern kings at that time, he had a huge harem with many wives, but among these, he had only one queen, the beautiful Queen Vashti. Unfortunately, Queen Vashti offended Xerxes in the 3rd year of his reign. As a result, the emperor banished her from his kingdom. The king's ministers suggested that he find a new queen. Let a search be made for beautiful young girls throughout the land, they said. The king can choose a new queen from these. The emperor liked this idea. So all the prettiest girls were brought to the palace to be presented to the king. Among those chosen was a beautiful Jewish girl named Esther. She was an orphan and had been adopted by her cousin Mordecai. He was one of the Jews who still lived in Babylon. Mordecai escorted Esther to the palace and was given a job there so that as her guardian, he could watch over her. Mordecai advised his cousin not to tell anyone that she was Jewish. When finally the lovely young girls were presented to the emperor, Esther was the one whom he found to be the most attractive in every way. "You shall be my queen," said Xerxes, and then he gave a great banquet for his beautiful new bride. All right, so while he was working in the palace, Mordecai overheard 2 of the king's officers plotting to kill the emperor. So Mordecai quickly told his cousin, the queen, to warn her husband. This she did, and the 2 plotters were executed. All these events were written down in the royal records. Not long afterwards, the king promoted a man called Haman to be his prime minister. All the officials and nobles bowed to Haman as he walked by, everyone, that is, except for Mordecai. Haman was a proud, scheming, ambitious man. When it came to his notice that Mordecai the Jew did not show him respect, Haman was furious. He decided that not only did he want to kill Mordecai, but he would kill all the Jews in the kingdom of Persia. Haman consulted with the court astrologers, who cast lots to choose the best day to eliminate the Jews. The lot, known as the Pur, fell on the 12th month. This was to be the time. Then Haman went to the emperor. "Your Majesty," he said, "there is a race of people in your land whose customs are different from ours, and who do not obey the king's laws. If it pleases the king, let an order be given to destroy them. I will pay into the treasury a large sum of money to pay the men that carry out this business." Haman intended to steal the Jews' own silver to pay for this. Without thinking, the emperor took his signet ring and put his seal to the new law. So it was announced that on the allotted day, every single Jew in the empire would be murdered. When Mordecai heard this terrible news, he was horrified. He sent a message to Esther. "You must go to the king," he wrote. "Plead mercy for the Jews." But Esther was frightened. The emperor had not asked to see her for a month. To enter the royal presence without the king's request could mean the death sentence. "I dare not go to him," replied Esther. "He may no longer be pleased with me." Remember, he's crazy. But Mordecai insisted, "You are a Jew. You will die anyway if this law is enforced. Perhaps the reason God has given you such a privileged position is in order to save his people." So Esther asked Mordecai and all the other Jews to fast and pray for 3 days. "Then I will go to the king," she said. "If I die, so be it." 3 days later, the queen put on her finest royal robes and jewels. Then, summoning all her courage, she went to the doorway of the emperor's throne room. If he was in a good mood, he would hold out his golden scepter. Summoning her into his presence in a bad mood, he may order her execution. The king looked at his beautiful wife. Then slowly he held out his golden scepter. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" he asked. Esther asked the king if he and his prime minister would dine with her that evening. The king agreed, and later that evening the queen served a banquet to Haman and her husband. "What would you like me to do?" asked the king. "Whatever you request, it will be granted." So Esther delayed a little longer and asked the king if he and Haman would dine again with her the following night. The prime minister returned home feeling very pleased with himself. "The queen has asked me to dine again," he told his wife. "I must have impressed her, but I will not be happy until Mordecai is dead." His wife suggested that Haman build a gallows and hang Mordecai. "What a good idea," said the prime minister. "I'll do it tomorrow." Meanwhile, that night, the emperor could not sleep. While he was awake, he called for his secretary to read with him the royal record of events. Amongst these were the details of the plot to murder him. So the emperor was reminded that Mordecai had saved his life. "Was that man rewarded in any way?" he asked his secretary. "No, your majesty," the secretary replied. At that moment, Haman came to seek an audience with the king. He was planning to request the execution of Mordecai. As he was ushered into the emperor's presence, Xerxes asked Haman, "What would you do for someone you wanted to honor?" Haman stopped in his tracks and thought that the king wanted to reward him, so he replied, "Dress him in a royal robe and place him on a royal horse with a royal crest. Let the man be led through the city proclaiming, 'This is what is done for a man the king honors.'" "Go at once," ordered the king. "Do this for Mordecai." Haman was horrified when he heard these words. Obviously, he could not now request Mordecai's death. That night, Haman and the emperor dined with Queen Esther. Afterwards, the king asked the queen, "Now what is your request? It will be given to you." Esther took a deep breath and asked, "Your Majesty, please spare my life and that of my people, for we have been condemned to death." "What?" cried Xerxes. "What man would dare to do such a thing?" Esther pointed at Haman. "That man," she said, "that vile Haman." The king knew he had been tricked by Haman, and he was furious. He paced up and down the garden, thinking of what to do. Then a loyal servant said, "Your Majesty, Haman has built a gallows near his house. It is to hang Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." "Then hang Haman on it," boomed the emperor. So the soldiers took the prime minister away to his death. The Persian emperor, however, could not change any law once he had put his seal on it. He could not cancel the order to murder the Jews. What he did do was issue a proclamation throughout the land that on the day allotted to the execution, the Jews were to arm themselves and fight those who came to kill him. This they did. The Jews have never forgotten the day Esther risked her life to save them. To celebrate the anniversary of Purim, the day chosen for the mass execution, religious Jews always read out the book of Esther and thank God for their deliverance. So, I just wanted y'all to know, you hear that story about Esther all the time, but it's not just a Bible story. I mean, the Bible is true. It's God's words to us, and it's infallible, and we can trust it. But it also lines up with ancient history. So it's just, to me, really interesting to know that Esther was married to Xerxes, who was the guy who fought Leonidas and the Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. So now you know, and that's all. So y'all go, ask your mom to read you some more of the Bible.